one of the reasons that we are in this place in history is because we have atomized.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch in Washington, D.C.
We have separated, we have divided, we have become independent instead of interdependent. So I think the greatest antidote to this moment is to recognize how we got here and undo and unravel those steps and build something that is solid, that is created with intentional design for us to flourish only when the other flourishes as well.
Minnesota is home to the country's largest Somali population. The state and the capital of Minneapolis in particular are home to a vibrant and diverse immigrant communities with a notable Muslim presence. The growth of these communities dates back decades, but has recently been the focus of President Trump's dehumanizing rhetoric and is now the target of ICE's cruel attacks. This week, we'll turn to Dr. Najeeba Syeed, a university professor and longtime interfaith and conflict resolution expert who lives in Minnesota, for insights on the situation and strategies for building resistance. We need these voices heard now more than ever. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do these things really helps other people discover our show and become listeners too. Our library of past conversations includes over 150 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Father Jim Martin, Representative Jasmine Crockett, author and SiriusXM host John Fugelsang, and many others. You can help grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. Before we get to this program, I want to just name the heartbreak that has happened recently. The shooting at Brown, the terrible attack on the Jewish community that happened in Australia, and the death of Rob Reiner, the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife. It really, I think, just was heavy on all of us. And I just want to make sure that all of you, especially in the Jewish community, as you observe Hanukkah, know that we at this show are with you, are thinking about you, are committed to stopping anti-Jewish violence, anti-Semitism, as well as just recognizing that we all need to come together and we all need to be a part of fighting this. So, one of the stories that came out of Bondi Beach was that it was a Muslim man, tackling one of the shooters. And it's just important that in every moment we find, as Mr. Rogers said, find the helpers, find the places, the people who are bringing us together, who are trying to knit us together. And I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you and your broken hearts, and stand shoulder to shoulder with you, with all of us together, and invite us to continue this democracy project that brings people of diverse backgrounds, races, religions, all kinds of diversity together, believing that we can become one, e pluribus unum. And so with that in mind, I want to turn to an ad that we created at Interfaith Alliance this week.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth.
You're listening to an ad that Interfaith Alliance put out this week that's called "In America, We Love Our Neighbors." In the ad, it juxtaposes the beauty, the warmth, the holiness of this season with the images that we have seen all too much of, the cruelty of ICE inflicting violence on our immigrant communities and our neighbors, our friends, our family. And what we want people to do is wake up to the fact that this is a moment when we have to recognize that things are being done in our name that don't align with who we are as people of faith and our morals. And you're going to see this ad. I encourage you to look for it. And you can go to lovenotice.org to find out more about the campaign, what you can do, add your name to it. It's just really important in this time, especially given the conversation you're about to hear about the abuses of ICE, the lack of due process, the ripping families apart, the laying traps for people at court cases where they're doing the right thing. And especially the violence. So I encourage you to look out for this campaign and add your name to this important idea. In America, we love our neighbors. We choose love, not ICE cruelty. Go to lovenotice.org. Last month, I attended the Festival of Faith in Louisville, Kentucky. I had a chance to spend a couple minutes with a man who has been in the headlines this year. Often described as the beloved chaplain at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Imam Solomon was seized by ICE this past summer and held for 10 weeks before being released. The case drew widespread support from faith leaders across the denominational spectrum and highlighted how arbitrary such detention actions can be. As lines of religious freedom are crossed more and more shamelessly by this administration, I want you to hear from Imam Solomon's reflection on his experience, which is now shared by a growing number of clergy, never mind thousands of laypersons. So I am honored again to be reporting from the Festival of Faith in Louisville, and I just got to hear an incredible presentation from Imam Solomon. Many of you listeners remember this story. We talked about this on the air. This is a beloved chaplain at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati who was abducted by ICE and spent 72 days, I think, in detention. And he just, he talked about the reality of that. And I'm not going to make him talk about it again because it was, it's a lot of difficulty and trauma. But I do welcome you, Imam Solomon, to this conversation, and just would love to hear your thoughts about how the listeners should react to this story and how they might how people did respond in real time, but then what can we learn from what happened to you and show up in such a way that doesn't keep happening?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and my greetings to your respected audience. I think learning from what happened to me, we can come up with few thoughts. One, I did not know it was happening until it happened to me, and unfortunately, it's happening to many people around us. Um, we have some moral obligation to really start checking on our neighbors, start checking on the people that more likely to face this injustice, and stand up for what is right. Just being white in this country does not actually make you immune of any discrimination or any injustice, because unfortunately, my understanding is that this administration is violating this law and using that against anyone who disagrees with them. It's not just about your skin color, although there is some racism out there, but I don't think this is the only problem. The problem is they really are working on reshaping this country in a way that befits their ideology. And anyone who disagrees, anyone who has liberal values, for example, anyone who understands Christianity different than them could be the next target. So it's actually hitting all of us.
Yeah,
There's
I just 100%. Like that, being Christian means nothing to them unless you agree with them on every point. I mean, that they are so well said, and you were beloved in your community. You were doing a job of a chaplain. And were faced incredible deprivation. So I also want to say, like, the, they came for you because you were vulnerable around asylum status and immigration status, which is something what we all know is that actually people who have American citizenship are being taken, but there is a special vulnerability out there. And your point about being aware of our neighbors, being aware of what people might go through, and showing up for them is just so well taken. So I'm sorry to interrupt. You have more to say that you've learned.
Yes. So it's not just about immigration. It's not about uh, people of color. It's about any resistance to their plans of reshaping and redrawing what America will look like and how Americans should think. The other thing is we are too strong when we are together, when we fight together. It is when we consider it as our fight. My case is a very clear example, a very good example on how far people can go and how much we can accomplish when we are together. When our collective efforts are way bigger than we imagine, and we just need to start somewhere, and things fall naturally. I was talking to some friends about our case, and all were involved in my case, and it does seem like very organized, but it was not actually that organized. Not People did not take care of all the details. They just started somewhere, and it looked very organized. It looked very organized. And if you look at the people who were leading it, it was not that organized, but it was organized enough to keep moving,
Yeah.
to have clear goals.
Yeah.
So we don't, we cannot underestimate our collective power, our collective efforts, and this government can easily be defeated.
I love that. And one of the things the stories you shared was that I think I have this right, but you can correct me, that there was a Jewish woman whose family you had cared for, who wrote a letter to her representative, her congressman, and gave him a letter and said, you have to know about this case. And I think that's an example of, you know, the, we don't have to know how to do everything to show up for one another. Like the theme of this big conference is belonging, and I do think, like, how do we expand the belonging? And I think that's part of what meant for people to show up with you, and how you're showing up for us as helping us learn this lesson. And so I want to thank you, and blessings on you. And if there is a way do you have a website or something where people can find you? Or
If you just Google the Ayman Suleiman, you'll find over 3,000. My team found 3,500 threads on the internet leading to me. Like between videos made and newspapers articles and stories. We'll find everything on.
Just and with a story like this, it doesn't end just when you get out of prison or detainment. It is ongoing. So we are so appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
I appreciate you inviting me, and may God bless you and bless your kind audience. Thank you.
And now to my guest. Dr. Najeeba Syeed is a celebrated peacemaker, educator, and scholar in interfaith studies and conflict resolution, serving as the inaugural El Hibri Endowed Chair and Executive Director of the Interfaith Institute at Augsburg University. She has more than 2 decades of experience in mediation, restorative justice, and social equity work. With communities in Minnesota, what can we say, being targeted for enforcement of capricious ICE policies, it is so important for us to talk to an expert witness and a leader to share her insights with us today. So, Dr. Syeed, welcome back to the State of Belief. I'm so glad to be talking to you.
Thank you. And I'm willing to talk to you, even though you're not an Augsburg grad, but a graduate of another Minnesota university that will leave unnamed.
It's called McAllister College,
Okay.
and I am coming back for my 40th reunion, and I am definitely coming across to see you and thank you personally for all that you're doing in this time. And I one of the reasons I want our listeners to hear from you, which you've been on the show before, but hear from you is you are clearly in the center of the storm. And I want to start just by acknowledging that that's difficult, and want to check in and see how you are feeling in spirit and heart and mind, and just to acknowledge that this is hard.
Definitely. And it's all happening in the midst of what feels like multiple feet of snow. So I would definitely, I think that you're right, that this is a time that we all have to kind of take a moment and take a deep breath and understand that multiple communities are exposed, multiple communities are facing incredible challenges, and that I think what has been beautiful about the approach of faith leaders in the cities is, well, what binds us together? How can we show up for each other? And I would definitely say one of the powerful things about this moment is that people who were not activated before, faith communities that sat on the sidelines, are asking, well, how do I show up for my neighbor?
Mm.
And it has been that's the part of the story that I think is really important to tell. And what I would say is that's not new to Minnesota. It's part of the fabric of this state, but also of the Twin Cities, has been a welcoming, the Cedar-Riverside neighborhood where our university is located, which is the largest Somali Muslim population outside of Mogadishu, that has been the history of this neighborhood. So it happens to be Somali Americans as well as people of East African descent from other communities. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we looked at the history of this community. In fact, generations ago, this was a neighborhood that had also a synagogue. So it was a place that received people that were fleeing persecution for being Jewish. For Protestant believers, we have a Lutheran university that came to be birthed here in this region. So I think that's important because part of the story we need to tell is the story of this region, and that it has always been a welcoming region, a place where you step off of somewhere else that was open to communities that were fleeing persecution. And I want to mention that because that's not only the story of this region, that's the story of this country.
Yeah, I love that you started there, because that is such an important message, and I think it's a central message that, having enjoyed hearing you speak and being the beneficiary of the Interfaith Institute at Augsburg University myself, and learning from you all that really the story of waves of immigrants, and then the next wave comes, and the previous wave, instead of shutting the door, says, here's my hand. And in some ways, the history and that you represent, and that the leadership of Augsburg University represents now, is actually our history is as a Lutheran university, and part of that history compels us to welcome the people who are coming to our shores and our doors right now. And I think that is so exciting, and the incredible diversity at Augsburg University that reflects the diversity of the Twin Cities. And I think that these are stories that, I just think it's so important that we lift them up, especially when the rhetoric is so terrible coming out of the White House. That's not the only rhetoric out there. It's not the only story out there. And we have to make sure that you, our listeners, hear these other stories that have to be even more compelling, because right now the narrative of who is American and who counts as American is really at stake.
Yeah, and I think also, like, I'll just share a story in the past couple of weeks as there was concern for communities experiencing targeting, particularly for rhetoric that was, could be hurtful for those communities. So I was at a meeting hosted by an imam, a Muslim leader, and a pastor. And so this is a meeting held by an imam and a pastor at a church. And one of the most powerful statements that came out of that evening was a rabbi who was attending. Mind you, they're all people here in the cities. And the rabbi said, I want you to know I'm showing up here tonight because for me, the targeting of a community with rhetoric that is dehumanizing, that's something my community has been through. So I feel compelled to show up today at this meeting and commit to whatever kind of support is necessary. So think about that for a moment.
Yeah,
A rabbi
yeah.
speaking in a church at an event held by an imam and a pastor. And that was all organic. That was all in the moment responsive. That was not something that we put together. Sometimes I just finished doing an interfaith dialogue for a workplace, and I had carefully curated my rabbi friend, my professor of Christianity, and actually in this case we engaged an atheist voice. This happened in the moment with moments notice that people showed up for each other. So what does that mean? It means that there is something visceral within us that says that the future we want for this country actually reflects our past. And I think that's what you
Mm,
said, Paul, is that we're not presenting a new model. This is
no.
not a new conversation. This is the story of our neighborhood, of a place that, as I mentioned, at one time was home to um, both not just Christians persecuting, Christians leaving or escaping from persecution, but also people who were in Jewish congregations.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It,
I
it
think
is
that's
it,
powerful.
it is so powerful, and and frankly, what we're describing here, this tension between these different narratives has also always been here. Because if we look back 100 years and people saying, "Oh no, we can only take so many from that part because there's too many," like Eastern European, too many Jews in the 20s or early, like that, the wrong kind of Jews. Up next, much more with Najeeba Syeed. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
Say hello to the all-new Alexa Plus and see how Alexa can do so much more for you. Need tickets to see your favorite artist? Craving your comfort restaurant? Just sit back, relax, and talk naturally. Alexa's on it. It learns your style, anticipates what's next, and makes it happen across Echo, Fire TV, and more. Learn more at amazon.com/new Alexa.
Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. My guest, Dr. Najeeba Syeed, Executive Director of the Interfaith Institute at Augsburg University. This laid on top of, the rhetoric laid on top of what is happening with ICE and with the, and I know that this is really affecting the community very, very in particular ways, and frightening ways. I don't know what you can share about how
Well,
the
I
Muslim
think
community is
I
reacting in this way, in this moment, or
I
you
think
know,
what's unique about the Somali community that folks may not know is that the vast majority are citizens.
right.
So over 80%, some say closer to 90, are US citizens, and many are born here. So many of our Somali brothers and sisters are quite young. So I think that raises a particular sort of need to think about, well, what does it mean? And I really wanted to talk about something here that I'm seeing from across the political spectrum, and this is the notion of collective punishment. So, some scholars call it also symbolic humiliation, where you pull out some people from a group, you identify them, you punish them, and make them examples so that the whole group will self regulate. That's, in fact, the best way um, to dehumanize and create an environment in which people are afraid. And so I wanted to mention that because I feel like there's rhetoric that says for some communities, if a couple of people do something that is unacceptable or problematic, the whole community must suffer. And I think that that's something we have to really think about from a
Hmm.
moral and religious perspective, that instead of saying, well, we want that to happen for other groups or for all communities, I've heard that argument, well, let's do that every group. Let's impose that equally on every group. And I want to stand back and say, actually, no, I don't want that for my Christian brothers and sisters either. I don't want there to be collective punishment for if an individual stands or has or made a mistake that the whole community should suffer. So I wanted to really have your listeners think for a moment about this notion of collective punishment and how it can be selectively imposed, and what is our intervention for that. Because I will frankly say another disturbing narrative that I've been hearing is, well, people voted a certain way, so they should expect a certain kind of treatment. And I also just want to point out the moral imperative that if that's also in many ways collective punishment.
Mm.
Let's take a moment to think about that. That if you voted this way, or you know, I think about this notion of chaplaincy for everyday democracy. I've written about it.
Yeah,
And if we
I love that.
extend chaplaincy principles to this moment, it doesn't matter to me how you voted. It matters to me what is happening to you right now in this moment. And I worry that people can dismiss suffering.
Hmm.
And we don't know, like, what is that percentage? Okay, if 60% of you voted this way, then you don't deserve it. But if 30%, what's that threshold? There's
Yeah,
always some people that didn't vote that way. And what about children?
yeah.
Children don't have that right. So do we
Well,
punish the children of that community? I just wanted to point that out because I think that there's some ways in which we have to be very careful if we approach any suffering in the world. How much do we blame people for bringing it on themselves? And how much are we able to say, wait a minute, no one deserves to suffer?
yeah,
And we want to find ways in which we move forward together. I want to think about how we create spaces that happen, as I mentioned, that are unifying instead of more splintering, more divisiveness, more polarity, because I don't think that's really a way that we're going to solve any of the issues that we face, whether it's in this moment or in the future.
yeah. Is there anything that our listeners like? I think you said earlier, like people have shown up in positive ways. Like, what are some tangible things that this, it's Minnesota now, but it's been so many other communities, and this will continue, unfortunately, to happen. And it's on all of us to imagine ourselves as responding positively in these moments. I wonder if you have any steps that you think are really good steps to take for people who want to step into this from the perspective of really believing that what you said, no one deserves to suffer, no one deserves to be targeted, and we all need to show up for one another in moments like these. What are like one or
Well,
two
I would say
specific things?
Yeah, definitely. There's also some examples from the past week. I think one thing we do is sacred witness, is showing up just to witness, because as I was telling someone, we may not be able to change the outcome of something. We may not be able to change the outcome of suffering, but in those moments of suffering, if there's no one saying, we don't co-sign this, if there's no one in the street that sees that act of robbing someone of their freedom, if there's no one there, then that means not just for that moment, but for history, that it's that sacred act of witness. So whatever that might be, in whatever scenario or situation, just even if you're silent, you don't need to say anything. But the presence to say, as a person of faith, a person of moral foundation, that we need to be able to say, listen, this is not something that I am a proponent of,
Yeah,
that I don't have the power, I don't have the resources, and I'm showing up. And that's why, if you think about whether it's the civil rights movement, or you think about so many movements throughout history, it's that physical, embodied showing up that becomes part of the calculus that pushes the moral compass, that arc that Dr. King talked
yeah,
about. Don't underestimate your
right.
physical, emotional, spiritual presence, not just as a witness for history, but as a witness for the people that are going through that experience. And I just wanted to invite all of us, like, we're not all ready for everything.
Right.
We're not all prepared. We may have risks in our lives. We may have young children that we need to tend to. So I'll just give you a beautiful example of locally here in our neighborhood. Last Friday, um, a group of mostly Christian, but not only Christian, people of different faiths, people of no religious tradition. Keep that in mind too. If you're a listener and you don't have a religious tradition, you can still show up. Went to the local mosque, and this is a practice that they've done before, which is serve tea. And in this case, it's a mostly Somali mosque, so the tea is Somali. And if you've had Somali tea, you know that it's incredible and really good. And as an act of service, show up, serve the tea, and just show up there saying, we're here. And this happened, apparently not just in we kind of did it locally on our own, but it happened across the state of Minnesota with multiple organizations where people showed up at the Friday prayer, not just as an act of safety and security. Sometimes I think people focus on safety, security, reduction of harm, which is absolutely an important way to show up in some ways. But that takes training, that takes, other efforts. There are ways in which we can show up just to say, I'm here. And I've
Mm,
been talking a lot about public theology. Public theology doesn't have to be a written word. Public theology
right.
doesn't have to be something in which you give a sermon on. What if public theology were these acts of care? What if public theology was exactly as we did in that moment, just show up? And I cannot tell you the degree to which our neighbors said, "Thank you for being here. This means so
Mm,
much to me." These
yeah.
seem like small pieces of a much larger puzzle, and I think there are so many other ways that we need to show up or can show up. I just wanted to encourage us to think about that act of neighborliness as,
Yeah.
in my work, I call it embodied empathy.
I love that, and I think that that is so important. And the where we place our bodies in this moment, and I really think it's important for the listeners to hear, but all of us to recognize we're not always like not all of us are ready to get arrested, or that's a very particular kind of action. But there's so many other actions that can be also really important. And also like this can change the way people understand a moment. And I remember doing a piece when I was at Huffington Post, and there was a lot of push to like, oh, religion is doing bad things again. Let's cover that. And those do really well. Let's get a lot of clicks. Well, my push always back was like, actually, when religion does good things, which it does even more than it does bad things, those get even more clicks. And one of the examples I gave was like, we covered this story about these Muslims who surrounded a church in Pakistan with like holding hands saying, we are going to show up for our neighbors and offer them protection and love. And it had a risk factor, but mostly it was about symbolic and showing up and public theology. It was like, this is what matters to us. Well, let me tell you, you want a viral piece that did better than almost any piece in the history of Huffington Post, which is saying something because
That is saying something because it means people are hungry for those stories.
They are hurting for those stories. And let me tell you right now, we've been following what's been going on in Minnesota on our social platform at Interfaith Alliance, and we highlighted some of the speakers from that service that you mentioned. It's going crazy. People are starving for those
are multiple. I'll highlight. There was what I was talking about. There was a meeting at a church. That was a very small meeting in our neighborhood. Then there was a large press conference that you highlighted, and then so there have been lots of things happening.
There's been lots of things.
And then there was the tea showing up at a mosque with tea. And this is just like a very small piece. What I thought was really powerful about a press conference, and the message was, we're here together. That was really the message. We're already here. We're here together. And, one thing I've been hearing a lot from the Somali American community is first of all, don't say Somalian because there isn't such a thing, but don't just say Somali, add the American. Say Somali American because this is a community that is part and parcel, is a part of the fabric of this community, is a part of, has been here now, as I mentioned, the vast majority are citizens. So they really see themselves not just as Somali, but as Somali American. And that when we remove the American, then in fact, that is also signaling something about exclusion. So part of the inclusion. So I just wanted to think about how important language can be in these moments and what I've learned from this community. And I would say that, for instance, when we think about what people are experiencing, the causes of it can be multiple. And particularly with Somali Americans, one of the things that generates, unfortunately, so much of the rhetoric around hate is a kind of triple reality, which I think are superpowers and beautiful. And I have a lot of students that embody this. It's the reality of facing anti-Blackness, facing anti-immigration and anti-immigrant and xenophobic views, and anti-Muslim rhetoric. So I wanted to point out that alchemy of identity, which is an incredibly positive experience. That's what I want to remind people, is that there is so much beauty in these different communities and identities, but unfortunately, people have twisted that. So you're going to see interventions that need to happen at all of those different levels. So sometimes it's interfaith conversations, sometimes it's showing up interfaith wise, if that means or makes sense in our religious spaces, but there are also many other spaces where people can show up. So I'll give another example. Right now, throughout Minnesota, a lot of immigrant enterprises are suffering because people are afraid to show up and shop. So locally here, there was a group that came together that said, we want to just shop in the local Somali businesses. And then this happened also at another part of the city with Latino businesses. So actually, that's another thing you can do. Spend your dollar in a community that is suffering because of economic decline because of the reality. So I wanted to point that out too.
Yeah, I love that.
The last thing that I've seen a lot of action around has been showing up with food. So actually, this is something our evangelical Christian community has been leading on, some of them from the Latino community, some of them from other communities, that there have been food shelves and food banks in our community centers. But showing up, and it hasn't been just faith-based places. There have been businesses, Latino businesses, that have said, hey, we're noticing people are not coming, they're not able to come. Why don't we take the food to them? And
Mm,
one of the local pastors in Minneapolis and St. Paul has organized hundreds of people doing that kind of work. So there's ways in which you can show up that are really following the commandments of your tradition. Feed people, clothe people, all of those
yeah.
things. We don't have to. I think this is something I really want us to think about is we do so much crisis response work.
Mm,
What if we began to integrate what we learned, for instance, in the pandemic around feeding people, what we learned around neighborliness, if we were to continue to integrate that into the lives of our religious communities, and I think many of us have, but what if we were to continue what we build now and it becomes the practice that once a month a church shows up at a mosque, once
mm,
a month a mosque, I just wanted to
yeah.
encourage us to think about this moment. But one of the reasons that we are in this place in history is because we have atomized, we have separated, we have divided, we have
Mm,
become independent instead of interdependent. So I think the greatest antidote to this moment is to recognize how we got here and undo and unravel those steps and build something that is solid, that is created with intentional design for us to flourish only when the other flourishes as well.
mm. Last question that I really would love to hear you talk about is that we've been talking a lot about courage this year and what courage looks like. What does courage look like to you right now?
I mean, I think courage looks like standing for a definition of America that answers the question whenever I intervene in conflicts, and I've talked about this question with you, is are we in each other's futures? And I think courage right now looks like not, at times lip service in inclusive language, but I think at the deeper level, courage looks like those of us that are being left behind, us showing up, being there, being at the table, staying at the table, saying that even when, it's been really concerning for me reading reports about young children who are impacted by feeling like they as a community are have such dehumanizing terms to them. Courage is us staying. I mean, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's showing up and staying and saying, "You know what? I have a collective vision in which I'm a part of it." And so courage for people who are deeply dehumanized, continuing to exist. And that's really something I was gonna mention that we're learning from a lot of Native and Indigenous leaders in Minnesota is just their current and continuous existence is in itself an act of incredible power, right? That they continue to exist. And I would say that for all of us, courage means taking a moment to question whether or not the vision that you have for your family, for yourself, is it truly interrelated with people across different traditions? Um, I worry that a lot of times, and this is for all of us of all different religious traditions, that line between how do we instill pride and confidence in our religious history and our religious teachings, where does that line move into, well, I have pride, and that means it has to be tied to me being in power? Are we able to begin to understand how pluralism is not just about religious literacy, but how does it relate to power making and power building? Does it mean that if someone else from a different community gains power, that that's taking away mine? And I still think we are often, even in spaces where people are very deeply engaged in social justice work, still thinking about a zero-sum game of power. And I really want us to think about these notions of chaplaincy in our work with one another, because to me, it's much more powerful in many ways if we begin to interpret moving forward as a country in a far more collective notion than in just my own individual community. Because right now, we have people that are convinced that the future of this country, if it's not exclusive to one group, it will not be successful. And I don't want to reiterate, reify, recreate that narrative and say, well, the solution is not your group, but my group, but the solution is actually all of us. And I think it's going to take a new way, a recalibration, a reimagination of what achieving power means. And I hope that we start to have those real conversations about collective, inclusive, engaged, interdependent visions of power building and power making together.
Dr. Najeeba Syeed is the inaugural El Hibri Endowed Chair and Executive Director of the Interfaith Institute at Augsburg University. Thank you so much for being with us here on The State of Belief, and we just appreciate you so much and your voice and your wisdom.
Thank you.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion? Please share The State of Belief with them, and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to keep growing The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.